After 16 years, Karen, your abilities no longer align with our goals. Megan flatly stated, your access ends today, her face filling my laptop screen. I smiled and said, I completely understand. She appeared relieved by my professional response. The Zoom call had been an unforeseen last-minute meeting request with my team lead, Megan Russo. And Jessica from Human Resources joined in silence. I had dedicated almost 20 years to Hollowgate Systems in Minneapolis, Minnesota, building their operations department from the ground up, mentoring numerous junior employees over the years, and calmly and precisely handling every crisis. However, 6 months ago, Hollowgate underwent a corporate restructuring. Brought in fresh priorities and new leadership. Megan was hired from outside the company, and she was eager to make a lasting impression. She had hardly had time to learn our systems before beginning to replace them, and now apparently it was my turn to be replaced. Jessica said, we'll need your laptop shipped back by Wednesday. She said, I'll email you the shipping details and exit paperwork, with the practiced impartiality of someone who had given this speech numerous times. Of course, I answered calmly, is there anything else I can do for you before I leave? Megan shook her head, saying, that's what we appreciate your years of service, Karen. Megan was unaware that I had already accepted an offer to serve as Director of Operations at Ironwood Forge, Hollowgate's biggest rival, beginning 16 years ago, but the call stopped abruptly, and I slumped back in my chair and stared at the blank screen. We had known each other professionally for years, occasionally running into each other at industry conferences. On Monday morning, 3 weeks prior, Ironwood CEO Douglas Williams had contacted us after learning of the changes at Hollowgate. He had stated in our first meeting that Hollowgate was making a mistake if they were ignoring you. I always appreciated your operational expertise. We could use someone with your experience and knowledge. A week later, I received an offer that included a significant pay raise, directorial status, and the ability to create my own team. I signed the contract yesterday, shut down my laptop, and checked my phone. 2 texts had arrived during the I met Tom 16 years ago at a tech conference in Chicago, where he was giving a session on network security. The first Zoom call was from my husband, Tom, asking how it went and asking me to call him when you were finished. The second was from Douglas' office, ready for Monday's team and excited to meet you. I smiled to myself, this is the beginning of something great. There, on behalf of my former employer, we struck up a conversation over coffee during a break. And 6 months later, we were married, and I had accepted an offer from Hollowgate Systems to relocate to Minneapolis and establish their operations department. The first few years at Hollowgate were thrilling because we were a smaller company. The company was then agile and creative, and I was free to put my ideas into practice to develop effective systems and create something significant. My team expanded. From just me to 25 skilled professionals overseeing operations for a quickly growing company. Harold Wilson, our former CEO, had been my biggest supporter, Karen, and he would say that you are the foundation of this business without you. Harold retired last year, and everything changed. The board brought in Vivian Torres, a hard-charging executive from a larger tech firm known for aggressive growth strategies, and Torres wasted no time in reshaping the company to fit her vision. Once again, we would fall apart. Megan Russo, one of Torres's first hires, was 35 years old, had an impressive resume, but had little experience in our particular industry. Despite my tenure and institutional knowledge, she was placed above me. Torres announced in the all-hands meeting that we need fresh perspectives and that Megan was the new blood that would take us to the next level. The writing had been on the wall, so I wasn't surprised by today's Zoom call because of the timing. I tried to make it work, sharing everything I knew, documenting procedures, and offering insights based on years of experience, but Megan seemed determined to claim her territory by rejecting my suggestions and gradually excluding me from meetings where operations were discussed. When I called Tom after the meeting, his outrage on my behalf was heartwarming but unnecessary. I reassured him that it's okay, saying, "This gives me the perfect excuse to take the weekend off before starting at Ironwood on Monday." "You're taking This remarkably well. At least they had the courtesy of a transition period. I responded, his voice knew me too well. Let's just say I've had time to prepare mentally. I might feel a little relieved that, despite Megan's belief that she solved a problem, she's actually created a much greater one for Hollowgate. Tom chuckled too late. I had been careful not to bring sensitive information home, but habits developed over years of proprietary work were difficult to break. I stopped over a picture last weekend as I went through my home office, sorting materials from 16 years at Hollowgate, most of which would be shredded. I had already teased you when you finished the last piece of chocolate cake. Harold Wilson stood in the middle, his arm around my shoulders, and I could see the pride on his face. Of my original team, 5 of us crowded into Hollowgate's first real office to celebrate our first major client implementation. The others had moved on years ago, so I wondered if any of them would be interested in joining me at Ironwood. When the first indications of change started to show, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie, my former mentee who had left Hollowgate 6 months prior. I heard the news of their loss and smiled, saying, "You're on. I have interesting news to share," as Natalie had grown under my guidance from an eager but inexperienced college graduate into a when she left Hollowgate, a number of clients inquired about her absence, and I suspected that Torres and Megan had underestimated her influence, just as they had mine. I kept organizing papers, occasionally putting aside notes or documents that would be helpful in my new position, but nothing private or that would violation of my employment contract with Hollowgate, but the wealth of knowledge and understanding that was exclusively mine came to me at midnight. An email from Jessica in HR Karen arrived with instructions for returning company property and your exit paperwork attached. On behalf of Hollowgate Systems, we appreciate your years of devoted service and wish you the best. And I shut down my computer and went to join Tom, who was reading in bed as he looked up from his book. He said, "I don't think I've ever seen you this calm after a major life change," and I slid under the covers next to him because the coldness of the generic message hurt more than I wanted to admit after 16 years reduced to a form letter. Tom persevered, saying, "It can't be easy to just walk away." I sighed, acknowledging the truth in his statement. I'm not walking away from what I built, I'm taking the best parts with me, the knowledge, the experience, the relationships Hollowgate may have. It's not the end of something, it's the beginning. Tom squeezed my hand and said, "I've outgrown Hollowgate. I just didn't know it until they forced me to see it that night. I slept more soundly than I had in months. They decided they no longer needed me, but they'll soon realize how much they've lost. Their mistake is Ironwood's gain." As I approached the most recent victim of the Torres regime, Natalie, in our usual corner booth, 2 glasses of wine were already waiting for her. I corrected the former victim and slid into the booth, the current victor. Natalie raised an eyebrow, and I told her about my new role at Ironwood, seeing her expression change from sympathy to delight. The expression on Megan's face when she learns that Ironwood Karen is the director of operations, she exclaims, "I would pay to see that." Though I couldn't help but smile, I responded, "I'm not doing this for revenge." "Of course not," Natalie said, not believing me for a moment. "You're doing it for the chance to grow professionally and work for a company that genuinely appreciates your knowledge." "Exactly, but the bonus of the retaliation is nice," she said with a smile. I smiled, thinking it might be a little more. We clinked glasses, so Natalie leaned forward. "What will be your first move?" "Creating a Douglas has given me a lot of latitude there, team," I said. "Interesting," Natalie swirled her wine. "Do you have any specific talent in mind?" "Yes," I met her gaze directly, I said. "You blinked me." "Senior operations manager reporting directly to me, 20% salary increase over your current position plus better benefits." I slid a folder across the table, and the official offer is in there. "I've always said you were underpaid at Hollowgate. But wouldn't this seem like poaching?" I finished for her. "Of course it is, but you left Hollow. Douglas approved it yesterday," and Natalie opened the folder quickly, scanning the document inside. Her eyes widened at the numbers, saying cautiously, "It's what you're worth. Although I technically stole from Trevalent Corp." Months ago, Natalie was still hesitant because it would appear that we had planned this. I firmly stated, I'd be foolish not to bring in the best operations specialist I know, and Douglas agreed. Natalie slowly turned the pages, thinking about when she would need an answer. Take the weekend, I said, but I start on Monday, and I'd like you there with me. We spent the next hour catching up on personal news and talking about the changes at Hollowgate since Natalie's departure. She confirmed what I had suspected, that longtime employees were updating their resumes and that morale was dropping. I closed the folder and tucked it into her bag. You know, I've always wanted to work with you again. I said, yes, I'll call you tomorrow. Petersham Industries had been Hollowgate's first significant client, and their CEO, Victoria Petersham, and I had built a solid working relationship over the years. However, clients were becoming anxious about stability, and the Petersham account was especially unhappy. Natalie mentioned they've worked with you since the beginning and are anxious about the transition. Years, that's good to know, I said, putting the information away. As we were getting ready to leave, my phone buzzed, and it was Victoria Petersham. I heard about your departure from Hollowgate, which is very concerning. Can we talk Monday? I had to make some important decisions. I showed Natalie the message, she said with a low whistle. That didn't take long. No, I agreed, and the weekend suddenly looked very interesting. Monday morning arrived with a mix of anxiety and excitement. I dressed carefully, selecting an outfit that was confident but not ostentatious, because this wasn't about making a statement, rather, it was about beginning a new chapter. At the entrance, Tom gave me a professional kiss and said, "Go show them what they're missing." Grinning proudly, the Ironwood Forge offices were located on the top 3 floors of a modern downtown building with expansive views of Minneapolis. The receptionist called me Director Delaney and welcomed me to Ironwood, where Mr. Williams was waiting for me in the conference room. Douglas greeted me with a warm handshake and said, "This is Karen Delaney, our new Director of Operations. She's right on time and ready to meet your team." Absolutely. I followed him into a large conference room with about 15 people present, and he said, "This is Karen Delaney, our new Director of Operations. Many of you know her by reputation. We're really happy to have her on board." I noticed a good balance of experience levels and specializations, a well-built operations department, and one more addition. The welcome was sincere, and the introduction went smoothly. I recognized a few faces from industry events, but the majority were new to me. Joining us today, Douglas kept looking at the door as it opened, and Natalie Chen, our new Senior Operations Manager who will be reporting directly to Karen, entered looking a little anxious but composed. I tried to maintain a neutral expression. But on the inside I was thrilled that Natalie had made her choice following the after introducing himself. Douglas led us on a tour of the facilities, which concluded at my new office corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a door leading to a smaller office that would be Natalie's. "I'll let you settle in." Douglas mentioned that we have a leadership meeting to discuss strategy at 11. He stopped at the door, and by the way, Victoria Petersham called this morning, and she would like to meet with us tomorrow. I nodded without surprise, and I'll be ready. After Douglas left, Natalie slipped into my office and shut the door, saying, "We're really doing this." "We are," with barely contained excitement. "Thank you for joining me. Are you kidding? This is the opportunity of a lifetime." She looked around the impressive office and nodded. Natalie became serious. "Word of your departure spread like wildfire on Friday afternoon, and the operations team is panicking. Megan doesn't understand half the systems you built." This was valuable intelligence. "How do you know all this?" "I still have friends there." "Bad place to land?" I agreed. "No, it wasn't bad at all," stated with a slight smile, adding Jason from IT. Jason Hall had been with Hollowgate for nearly as long as I had, and he had been a reliable ally during my time there. "Is he trying to get close too?" Natalie shrugged when I asked him carefully, but he didn't answer anything specific. Talk about how annoying it is to watch Torres and Megan destroy functional systems without comprehending them. This is another piece of information that I would need to carefully file away. Poaching a former coworker might be dismissed as a coincidence. But methodically hiring a whole team would be correctly interpreted as a strategic attack. Let's concentrate on establishing ourselves here first. I said, we can talk about possible recruits later. Natalie nodded and got up to leave, adding, one more thing you should know is that Megan has been frantically calling and emailing me all weekend trying to figure out how to access your operational documentation. I grinned, but I felt bad for her because you didn't leave. The leadership meeting at 11 introduced me to the rest of Ironwood's executive team. Douglas had put together an impressive group of seasoned professionals who asked insightful questions and showed genuine interest. I responded to the transition plan, but understanding the documentation requires context, which Megan never bothered to learn. As the meeting came to an end, Karen Douglas, who serves in my vision for the operations department, said, tell us about your approach to client transitions, particularly for companies switching from competitors. This was a perfectly timed opening to discuss what everyone in the room was thinking about the possibility of capturing Hollowgate clients. The key is continuity. I started by stating that clients quit service providers when they feel their needs are not being met or when they lose faith in the provider's ability to be stable. Our job is to show that we understand their needs and can meet them without any problems. I outlined my plan, which included customized transition plans, implementation teams, and frequent check-ins during the process. I made it clear that we would not disparage Hollowgate or any other competitor. Instead, we would concentrate on our strengths rather than their weaknesses. The leadership team nodded in agreement, demonstrating how professionals worked. Following the meeting, I went back to my office and discovered an email from Victoria Petersham confirming our meeting for the following morning. After 16 years of dating, I realized that this wasn't a casual check-in because Victoria was seriously thinking about moving Petersham Industries from Hollowgate to Ironwood. My phone rang, and I put Megan Russo's name on the screen. A moment later, a notification appeared, and I hit play. This is Megan Russo, and even though I'm Karen, her voice sounded strained. We need to talk about the transfer of your operational knowledge because some of the documentation is unclear. Please call me back as soon as possible. 5 minutes later, a text message came in from the same number. This is unprofessional. The company needs your collaboration for a seamless transition. I grinned to myself as Megan learned that firing someone on a Friday afternoon without a transition period had repercussions. Later that afternoon, Natalie came to my office to assess the state of Ironwood's operations procedures, and she had already noted a number of areas where she clarified that their system functions, but it's not optimized. We could apply some of the improvements we made at Hollowgate to boost productivity by at least 20%. I nodded and drafted a proposal, which we'll present to Douglas by the end of the week. My phone buzzed again, and I ignored a call from Jessica in Hollowgate's HR department. I said, are you going to call them back, after Natalie noticed that they were becoming desperate and realized that institutional knowledge couldn't be transferred in a day. I took the question seriously and said, no, I fulfilled all my contractual obligations I owe them, especially when they didn't value it enough to arrange a proper handover. Nothing more. As the day went on, Megan from Jessica kept calling and texting, and at 4:30 p.m., Vivian Torres herself sent out a series of increasingly urgent messages. Torres' final text was especially illuminating. Karen, this is Vivian Torres. We may have been hasty in our decision. Please call to discuss possible by the end of my first day at Ironwood. I had planned meetings with important team members, outlined a thorough plan for operational improvements, and prepared for my conversation with Victoria Petersham tomorrow. As I packed my belongings to leave, Douglas dropped by my office to ask how my first day had gone. Douglas leaned against the door frame as I responded, I heard Hollowgate is trying desperately to reach you. I raised an eyebrow since news spreads quickly in this profession. Victoria Peters called me again this afternoon to say she was sending her CTO to our meeting tomorrow. The meeting with Victoria Petersham and her CTO, Andrew Michaels, started off formally but soon warmed up as we settled into the comfortable rhythm of our long-standing professional relationship. I'll be honest, Karen, Victoria wouldn't bring her technical leadership unless she was seriously considering a change. "We'll be ready," I assured him. After the introductory greetings, Victoria stated, "After hearing that you had been let go, we are concerned about Hollowgate's recent changes." Andrew nodded in agreement, saying, "The systems you built are integral to our operations. No one understands them like you do. Ironwood is ready to offer you a comprehensive transition package." Douglas seamlessly interjected, "and Karen would personally supervise the implementation." Victoria and Andrew looked at each other, and Victoria said cautiously that you would have the assurances of continuity I promised, along with enhancements to the current systems that I've been envisioning, but was unable to execute at Hollowgate. The 2-hour meeting covered a thorough transition plan, and at the conclusion, the decision was almost final. "We will need to review this with our legal team." Victoria stated that she was gathering her materials, but aside from any contractual concerns, "I think we have an agreement in principle." As they departed, Douglas turned to, "During the next 2 weeks, the pattern was repeated with 3 more significant Hollowgate clients, each of whom expressed similar concerns about Hollowgate's stability, lack of confidence in the new leadership, and, most importantly, their trust in me personally." By the end of my 3rd week at Ironwood, we had successfully transitioned 4 of them. He gave me an appreciative nod, saying it was masterful. Through industry contacts, I learned that Megan had been demoted and that Hollowgate's operations team was in disarray, struggling to handle the company's biggest accounts, which accounted for nearly 30% of their annual revenue. The news caused a stir in the industry, and analysts started to doubt Torres' leadership and strategic vision. Maintain service levels for the remaining clients. It wasn't personal, just business, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The last straw, however, came in the form of an unexpected meeting in my 4th week at Ironwood with Jason Hall. The IT director asked for a meeting, saying, "I've been with Hollowgate almost as long as you have." When we met for coffee, Jason nodded when I said, "Now you're thinking of moving." This was a big step because at least 6 senior team members, who were the backbone of Hollowgate's technical operations and had extensive institutional knowledge, were willing to jump ship. I said this carefully, but this would have to be handled tactfully. Of course, Jason acknowledged that we are experts. Within a month, Ironwood had expanded our team by adding 4 more important Hollowgate veterans, each of whom contributed invaluable skills and client relationships. The industry took notice of the ethical yet calculated way each transition was handled. 6 months after my abrupt dismissal via Zoom, Hollowgate announced a strategic restructuring, corporate speak for significant downsizing, and Vivian Torres resigned as CEO. Among those let go was Megan Russo. As a result, investment firms started to doubt Hollowgate's viability. Douglas found me in my office reviewing. "I didn't do this for revenge," I said, putting a newspaper on my desk with the headline, "Hollowgate Systems Announces Major Restructuring, CEO Departs." We both knew that wasn't totally true, but Douglas agreed with a knowing smile. "You did it because you're the best operations director in the business and they were idiots for letting you go," I replied. Our gain, their loss. Retaliation had never been the goal, but it was unquestionably delicious. As I drove home that night, I thought back on the previous 6 months, from the trauma of being fired to the success of creating something even improved at Ironwood. I had transcended personal confirmation of a professional reimagining.